Well, good morning and welcome to our weekly webinar. This is Patrick at Qdabra, where we have no fear, just fur. If you can hear me okay, I would like you to quickly raise your hand. I'll know that we have audio. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ran. It's a pleasure to have you all this morning. We often get about twice a year, maybe 3 times a year, we'll do a project or we'll hear from a customer, and they'll be wanting to integrate their form with offline users. And so we did this post back in 2009 because this is a very common scenario. Mel Balsamo, one of our key form design engineers here, we call her a form diva, she actually put this post together. And so we were doing a new project this last week where we had the same, and I want to thank Tom Buchanan for joining. This was inspired by the project we're doing for him. Anyway, we're doing this new project, and I thought, well, we've done this before, let's do it again. And what we're doing here is we're providing a solution that allows you to integrate those offline users who may not be connected with your online users and share all the information together in one place, and that's typically 365 or SharePoint on-prem. And to do this requires a little bit of trickery, and I'm going to talk in detail about it, but that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about a technique to allow you to collect data from people who are sometimes offline or always offline, may not have a 365 or SharePoint account, and it does require that you have this admin role, and we'll talk more about that role in a second. That person is the gatekeeper, shuttling those forms that get received in email to the SharePoint site. Now, if you have SharePoint on-prem, of course, you can set up the email to automatically be sent there, and that's a nice feature. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. 365 doesn't have that feature. As far as I know, they have not had it yet, so you can't do that with 365. So why do you care about this scenario? Well, sometimes you have workers that are offline, and of course InfoPath was built to support offline functionality. We also want to do stuff that doesn't require a lot of cost, so that we're presenting a solution today that has no third-party purchases required. You don't need anything from us. We're going to give it all to you. In addition, with 365, if you have to add a new user and they're an E3 account, it can take $20 a month, and a lot of organizations, they've got 1,000 users out there in the field, and they don't want to spend that. And then finally, adding a gatekeeper. While you may think that admin role, who's shuttling the forms from the email, that may be a bit of a nuisance to you. It's actually not a bad thing to have somebody review things as they're coming in, and it also provides an audit trail. So those are some reasons why this solution really is useful. So before the demo, I want to talk a little bit about some challenges here. Like I mentioned, you can't email directly to a 365 SharePoint library. We can do that with SharePoint on-prem, and we have several customers who have a library set up, and people just email an address, a distribution list, and those forms automatically start appearing in the library. That's really cool. Unfortunately, it doesn't work in 365 on, the tenancy doesn't allow that. The other issues we have are that username is different. With 2013 now, you cannot use a get user profile to get things like the email address. Now you can figure it out using username, and there are some techniques using our QRules plugin to allow you to still use get user profile. And the forms actually I'm going to give to you today have that built in, so you won't have to worry about that at all. But when you're dealing with offline forms, believe it or not, if you have a restricted form, you can't use username. So the offline users obviously don't have get user profile service, so why not use username? Well, it turns out that you can't use it in a restricted form. In addition, it's difficult to publish forms in a way that allows the admin user to work as kind of that intermediary, that gatekeeper. So I'm going to talk about this. We have a nice document I put together for you. And you'll get all of that as part of the package today. We're trying to get out of here in 20 minutes, so I'm going to zoom through this. And then finally, if you have email forms, you can certainly upload those to SharePoint as is, but relinking them can be a hassle. So this technique shows how to do this automatically. No relink is required. So those are some of the challenges. I'll go through all of these solutions, but in general, we're going to email the form to the field, and then there'll be this, like I said, this gatekeeper role that uploads the forms. We're separating out the SharePoint version from the email version, and that does require a local install. And once again, the URL for the form needs to be automatically updated. Now here's the schematic again. So once again, I'm going to show you first how we publish the form to SharePoint. So that's pretty standard. Everyone knows how to do that. The second thing I'm going to show you is how to send that form, that XSN, the form template, to your offline users, and I'm going to fill it out on a separate machine. And then I'm going to get that email from that user and upload it to SharePoint using my third role. So there's actually 3 potential roles here. One role is the person who's filling out the form online, and that could also be the admin because it's just a browser form. They can have it installed locally and they can do the online version. The second role is then that offline user. They could also be online, but in this case, for the demo purposes, they're temporarily offline. And then for the admin user, the gatekeeper, they're actually receiving those emails because of that lack of support for directly emailing the library in 365. They'll be receiving the emails, reviewing them, clicking a button to upload them. And then once the forms are uploaded, everyone can continue to use them in the browser in SharePoint. Okay, so, and I'll take questions at the end. So to start the demo then, I do have, these are the demo steps. So I'm going to publish the form to SharePoint. So I've actually already got the form published to SharePoint. And here it is. Here's my library, and I'm using a form to collect incidents. So let's imagine for a second that you're a construction organization and you have people on site doing work, and you want to make sure that they're safe, and if something happens, you want to collect that information. So this is the form that we've designed, and I'll just open this in the browser and show you what this looks like. So I've published this up here. This is just a stock SharePoint browser form. Just using InfoPath. First time I hit it this morning, so there's a little bit of a hiccup here as it loads, but we'll see it load in a second. We'll go through this. So here's my simple form. So I'm going to just fill out the form here. We'll say that we had an incident with the train hitting the truck, and that happened. I forget when that happened, but that was early in the morning, a couple of days ago. And that was not a workplace issue, but it was a public issue. But anyway, we'll just you can see here it automatically fills in my name and my email address. And we'll just type in some information that's required. Okay, no big deal. And it was Los Angeles, right? That's when the train hit the cat, right? And we'll skip this, the individuals involved, because we don't know the name of the guy who parked his truck on the tracks. And we'll just go down here and fill out this information. Injury, yes, sudden impact always causes injury for humans. And then we're done. We can add some more information here, but let's just submit this and show that we're submitting it to the same SharePoint library. There's the form I just submitted. If I click on it again, it's going to open it up in the read-only view. We have a separate view that we switch to if the form is read-only, so that's nice best practice, right? Okay, so that's our SharePoint form. That's V1. Now, let's say I want to take this form offline and send it to some people who do not have access. Okay, so what do? Well, I have a version of the form that I have email enabled, and you're going to get this folder of all the goodies in it. There's only 2 forms that we really care about here, the SharePoint form and the user form. We're actually going to generate the admin form and the other form as part of the process of publishing it. So the difference between the user form, which is the email version, and the SharePoint form is there's a couple differences. The key difference is number 1, this form has a compatibility setting that is restricted. I'm sorry, it's filler. It has to be filler, right? And then the security has to be restricted because we want to be able to send this XSN to somebody in email and have them double-click it and fill it out. Okay, so I'm going to do this, and now just to make sure I do this correctly, I've got this document that I'm providing to folks, and I'll just see if I can drag this over here. So you'll get this document with the deployment steps, and it talks about how to deploy to SharePoint. You're going to have to fix up the data connections. There's an automatic way to do that when you publish. Don't forget step 10 here when you publish your form out to your SharePoint site. But it should work just fine with your SharePoint site. You'll need to fix up the data connections, but that's automatic. And then there's some steps to download the form once you've published it, and we'll use that in the final configure the desktop admin. For the email form, though, I'm going to just walk through these steps. And these are pretty simple. Basically, all we're doing here is, let's see if I can close my windows here. For the email form, we're just going to actually go into the task pane here and make sure that the email is actually set up to the email we want to receive. So I've actually added the email address as a default value in my main data source. And the purpose is to allow for an easy change. So you'll want to change this to be your email. So that's the key step here before you send out the email. I'm going to leave it my name for now, but you could just change this to your name at yourorganization.com, right? And then it's going to send the email to you. And that's the key change that you need to make before you send out the form. Okay, so we'll do File Save As. Now, one of the kind of tricks that we're using here is we're overwriting this incidence form every single time we save. And the reason for that is versioning. Every time you overwrite a file, InfoPath actually looks at that file to see what the version is, and it increments it so that it's always incrementing it, so that there's never a situation where you have a form that is a previous version. And that's really important. It's kind of a hidden trick that we're using, and you don't really need to understand it. You're just follow the instructions, right? And everything will work just fine. So we'll close this out, and then I'll switch to email, and I'm going to actually send that XSN to myself. Now you can't see me doing this, so I'll drag my window over here. I'm just going to send this email to myself and switch my monitors. Okay, and we'll just attach that file. Now, you don't have to, the users don't have to have the form installed, but they do need to have InfoPath, and that is the key requirement. If they have Office, that shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so we'll wait until that, while that email is wending its way to my other machine, I'm going to switch to the other machine. And you'll see my 2013 machine here. Okay. I believe you can see it. We're still recording, and you still should have audio from me here. Okay, so there's the form. Okay, so I'm just received the form. Now, just to show you that there's no smoke and mirrors here, we're going to just launch InfoPath. Before we double-click on that guy, let's just make sure that we don't have any InfoPath installed. And the way you do that is you use this very tricky command called InfoPath cache clear all. And this is, of course, all documented. But this command will, of course, remove any cached versions of any InfoPath forms that you have locally. So let's just do that to show you that we don't have anything up our sleeves here. If I launch InfoPath again, you'll see that there's nothing that's actually cached on this machine. Let's close Outlook down, and we'll do this one more time here just to show you that there's nothing going to be cached anywhere. Okay, there's nothing there. So we'll launch Outlook again and double-click on that XSN. Now all they have to do is just double-click from email. And I've got one question here, so I'll get to you in a second. I just want to finish out the demo here. Okay, so here's my email with the form I just attached. All I'm going to do is just double-click on this. Now the form is not associated with the SharePoint site. It's associated with what we call a URN-based. It's a user resource name, it's a universal resource name. So it's associated with the name. So it's not associated with the website, so it doesn't really need to connect anywhere. It's just totally offlineable. And we'll fill out this form. We'll say there's some property damage. My cats scratched the furniture last night. Notice that the email does not come in here. We don't have any automatic typing. And we do have the fur factor here in force. And you don't really have to type this in, but we have it required, so we'll type it in. And once again, let's see, the individuals involved. Well, we have one Tonkinese. and her manager is a let's see, what is her manager? Her manager is a Turkish van. I'm trying to remember my cat species here, and her name is Tamara. She does not have a phone number. She has a chip implant. Okay, so anyway, walking through the form. What happened? Well, let's see. There was a raccoon raccoon invasion, and okay, that's it. That's fine. We don't need to do anything more. We're going to submit this form. Now, when we submit the form, it's going to send the email to that email address I configured, and you saw me do that. Okay, so we're going to switch back to my other machine. Hopefully we'll get the right machine, the right monitor here. And okay, so we're back to my machine, and let's see here. Let's make sure that I have email. Now, okay, now I've got the email here from this external user. You can see I just received it right there at 8:21 a.m. So what I'm going to do now is the final step, and that is to configure the local user. And the local user, you can see here's some steps. I put some screenshots into the document you're going to get. So we need to configure the local fiddler. And this is the trickiest step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on this. And what I've done is in step 1, where I published a SharePoint, I actually, at the very end of that, I saved it locally. And those steps are documented. And the form I saved was this admin form. And the reason for that is that the SharePoint form is going to run locally on the gatekeeper's machine. So now we're talking about that role number 3, the person who's receiving the emails who's going to upload them to SharePoint. And there are a few differences here, and this is, of course, all documented. Let's take a look at this form. This form is going to be installed locally on the machine that receives the email, which is this machine that you're seeing here. So this form is slightly different than the other forms, and what I want to show is we have to turn off these 2 rules. So on load, we have 2 rules to set the form's name. We actually switch to the read-only view if it's been submitted, and then we have another rule that actually sets the name, and you can see we're using Q rules here. You'll get that as injected in the form. You can use that. It's not required for this solution, but we're using it. It is required for one step, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, but in general it's not required. And that one step can be worked around. There's a workaround. Okay, so those are the 2 changes I need to make. I need to disable those rules. And then the other thing I need to do is I need to make sure that when I submit the form that I fix up the what we call the URL in the form. So when the form gets submitted, it is going to have the information from the user who filled it out in the field. It's not going to be associated with that SharePoint site. So I need to actually associate it with the SharePoint site. And to do that, I'm going to use a command called setPI. This is a rule. The PI is the processing instruction in the form. The first step we'll do is we'll remove the PI. And this is one of these are 2 Q rules commands that you need. If you don't have Q rules in your form, you can get it from us. We'll give you the free trial. You get it baked into this form. This form will work just fine. In addition, that you can manually do this. You don't need to do this. You can just have the form submitted, and then you can relink them. So it's not critical that you do this, but this does make it automatic. And then the second command is to go in here and insert the new PI. Now here, what we're doing is we're inserting the PI, and this command is a document, of course, but the key step here is at the end, we want to add in the URL for the location where we want it to live. And you can see that this is my webinar location for today. So I've already done this in advance to test this. So all you need to do is just fix up basically the first part of this URL. You just replace it. And like I said, that's all documented. Okay. So once you've done that, we'll file save as. And once again, we're saving it to that incidence form. We're overwriting this. And that's going to increase the version number. Okay, great. Now we'll close the designer. Now it's really important at this step that you actually close out your info path cache. So once again, on this machine, I'm going to also do the same thing I did on the other machine, which is to clear all of my info path. So now I'm completely blank slate. Okay, so once I've done that, now there's a couple more steps I need to do. Specifically, what I need to do is I need to take that form that I've just created, and I need to remove the href from it. So I need to make this a locally installed form, and there's two steps to do that. One is to run this little tool called remove href. Now you don't need to do this. You can actually do it from the network publish step in the InfoPath Designer, but I like this because it's just simpler. Even though it does require that you run this little tool. You'll get the tool for free as part of the webinar today. But it's really easy to run it. You just run it like that, and it's done. And it's removed the href. And then finally, we have to install the form. Why do we have to install the form? Well, it's running locally. It needs to connect to SharePoint. So that's cross-domain, right? Security prevents us from doing that unless the form is installed. So we have this other tool that you can use to install it. We've talked about how to install forms in the past. It's very easy to use this tool. You just drag it over Form Installer, and it'll register it. And you'll click OK to the dialog, and you'll get this warning message if you have InfoPath running. So really important, make sure InfoPath is not running. End process. Okay, and then we'll try it again. Okay, and this is what you should see. The template was successfully installed. Okay, so that's done. So now everything's working. So what I can do now is I can actually verify that that form was installed. How do I do that? Run InfoPath Filler without anything on it. Just open up the filler from Windows Start, and you'll see that that form is now installed. Okay, so this is once again for the gatekeeper role. So we're done with the gatekeeper role. We can go back to Outlook now, and we can double-click on that file. Okay, so there's the form. Just double-click on it. It launches InfoPath, and there's the data that was submitted. There's my Tonkinese cat and the raccoon invasion. I'll just add some text here, whatever, and I'm going to hit Submit. Now, when I hit Submit, what it's doing is it's going to, for the very first time you do this, it's going to say, wait a minute, are you sure you want to do this? And then ever since, you do it once, and it's going to work after that. So it's just that first time it does check with you to make sure that that it can upload it. And of course, if you're not logged in, you need to log in. It'll prompt you to automatically log in to your 365 account or wherever you have it published. And once this succeeds, you can see it's uploading it. It's done. Let's go back to our 365 site, and we'll refresh. And we'll see that we have this form up here. So if I click on this form, it's going to open it up in the browser. And that's the key coolness, right, is that we actually had our users fill out the field, they submitted it in, my admin person, gatekeeper, filled it, submitted the form, reviewed it, made sure it was okay, and you can see here that all the data got added correctly. So that's pretty much it for the quick demo. I'm going to switch back to the slide deck. Questions for me? Okay, so once again, I'll take questions in 1 second here. Let me clear my throat. Thanks for your patience through that demo. So once again, there are a couple gotchas. Here are the tips. I mentioned that versioning was a gotcha. Always overwrite. Don't tell me why. It's kind of a hidden feature in InfoPath. Publishing without a URL doesn't work. Well, once again, we have these two tools that will help you. And then finally, the caching complications. You need to make sure you clear all. And sometimes Outlook will cache it too, so don't forget that. So got some bonus for you. Oh yes, of course we always have bonus, and we're almost done. So let me just switch to Outlook and show you the bonus. So in Outlook today, I can actually create a new folder, and I can say this folder is my my incidents folder, right? And I can change the drop-down to InfoPath form items. Some of you may already know this. We did this in our training, and we do a training class. We try to do it every month. If you're interested, let me know. And then you can set up a rule to automatically copy your emails over into this this folder. Now, once you've done this, make sure that you go into Properties and associate it with an InfoPath form. And there's only one that's associated in this machine, so that's the one I'm going to pick. And then once I've done that, you'll see that I actually need to move these over again. It doesn't actually get the promoted properties unless things already associate. So I was a little bit too quick in dragging those emails over. Let's try it again here after the form's associated. And you'll see it still hasn't actually grabbed the contractor information from the form. But you'll see those values show up, those promoted properties. And the cool thing about using Outlook and InfoPath is that not only do you have one place for everything, but you can actually export stuff to Excel using these form actions. And you can do some quick ad hoc reporting locally. So your desktop admin could actually use Excel to look at the data that's coming in addition to uploading it to SharePoint. Now you can say, well, who cares? You could always just do it from SharePoint. Yes, indeed, you can have SharePoint export to Excel as well. But this is just a nice solution for people if they're offline, if the desktop is offline or something. Now you can see here some of the data got in here, and I'm not sure exactly why I got all this repeating data, but anyway, it's possible to do this, and you just need to look at it, and that was a bonus item, so I'm not going to go into that in much detail. Questions for me. Let's take a look at the questions we have and comments. So there's one question from Greg. What solution do you have for a customer client who does not have InfoPath Filler to fill out forms? That's a great question, and I just forgot that I wanted to actually do a couple polls here. So while I'm answering these questions, I'm just going to launch this poll and just get a little bit of information from everyone here. So to Greg's question, and Greg, thanks for being here today. And I think there's several different options. One option is to use the browser, and if they have network connectivity, of course, they can use the browser to navigate to their site. I'm wondering why the poll doesn't work. Oh, I guess the organizer can't vote. Okay, so you could use the browser, but obviously the browser isn't going to give you that rich client experience, and they're not going to. The browser isn't going to give you the. We'll do one more. So 62% of the people have 365 installed, and we'll do one more poll here quickly, and this is actually relevant to Greg's question. Do you have offline users or not? And if you do have offline users and you don't have InfoPath Filler, what I would recommend you do is, there's a bunch of options. One is you could use Word. You could fill in the Word form. And we're going to show a webinar in a couple weeks that shows you how to create a Word form from InfoPath data. So you could do this as part of the Word automation. It's all built into SharePoint, and you could fill in the Word document and just send the Word document down. Hopefully they've got Word. If they don't have Word installed, well, then I'd say third party. You want to look at something like, we have a third-party app. It does require connectivity, but yeah, you'd want to have some kind of a third-party app that reads that XML. And there's stuff like XML Spy that will do it. But in general, I think the best practice is, if they don't have InfoPath Filler, have them use a browser. If they don't have connectivity, put it in Word, have them fill out the Word form, send it in. There will be more difficult work to extract the data, but you can do it, right? And then finally, if you've got, anyway, great question. Thanks, Greg. And we have 79% of the people who have offline users. That's a lot. That's great. Okay, so we have a quick survey at the end here, and you're going to get all of these things that you saw. It's just 3 questions today, and really appreciate your feedback. All of these videos are on YouTube, and we would love to hear from you. Like I said, we're going to be showing that Create Word document from InfoPath in March. We've been postponing some of these webinars, and I apologize for the slip, but we will get to these things. We're going to show you browser performance again. We have not forgotten about that, and we're also just trying to get our other work done here, so we appreciate your patience. And that's pretty much it for today. I hope you all have a beautiful day wherever you are, and stay warm, eh? Take care. Thank you.